Welcome back, everyone, to the Moms Like Me podcast powered by Support Now. I am thrilled to be able to introduce my newest guest here, Lisa Boehm, who is a mom, a wife, a healthcare professional who has just a really incredible story to tell. I will warn you, this one might make you cry. So if you're listening, make sure you have some tissues handy. But I was really drawn to Lisa's story because while it ends in tragedy, she has found a way to really find some beautiful purpose in her grief and in her pain. And so one of the things I look for in guests for this podcast are people that we can look to for inspiration, not perfection. And Lisa, you certainly fit the bill. So thank you so much for being here today with me.
Well, thank you, Jordan. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah. So I'll kind of give our viewers or our listeners a peek under the hood here. Lisa, you're a mom, and your life changed very dramatically when your daughter, Katie, was killed in a car accident. I am very curious to learn more about kind of how you view the before and that moment, and then we'll get to kind of where we are in the after phase.
Absolutely. One thing I will say is that I don't have this all figured out. People look to you after you've been through tragedy, and I would say tragedy isn't the end of my story. Tragedy was the beginning of my story. But the long and the short of it is our 17-year-old daughter went out on a regular Tuesday night to run an errand in December of 2015. And my kids always had to be home at 10 o'clock on a school night. And at 9:45, I sent her a text. And I said, hey, hope you're on your way. See you soon. And no sooner did I send that text, there was a knock at the door. And my husband said he knew something was up right away. I, on the other hand, was thinking, why is Katie knocking on the door? She's got a key. But my husband went to the door. I could hear a very kind of loud male voice, and I knew something was up. So I went sprinting to the door, only to find out that our daughter had been killed in a head-on collision that night. And as you say, that these tragedies like this will split your life in two, before and after. And life, as much as you might want to try, life is never the same. And I think that's the challenge when you're faced with these things, whether it's going through a difficulty like divorce, relationship breakdown, job loss, all of these really hard things in life, is that we think the goal is to get back to quote unquote normal, who we were before. But that person never, they stop existing.
Yeah. Lisa, tell me more about Katie.
Oh, she was a spark plug. She challenged me in every way, shape, and form. She was the world's easiest baby, I will add. I didn't know what people were complaining about when they complained about their children getting up at night, because I would literally just lay Katie in the crib and she would sleep through the night from 6 weeks on. But as she got older, she became more stubborn, more determined. Maybe she got that from me, I don't know. But of my two children, she was the one that I never worried about. As I said, she was 17, but she was very clear in what she wanted in life. She was a go-getter. I'm going this way, and if you're not coming, that's okay, but get out of my way. 6 days before her car accident, she earned a scholarship, full scholarship, into the College of Nursing here where we live. She had great friends. She had a terrific boyfriend. She had her eyes set on higher education, and she was very health conscious. She'd been a competitive dancer for most of her life. So I thought, well, when you're focused on healthy decisions and you're focused on your future, what's there to worry about? But life doesn't always go according to plan.
Wow. How long do you feel like you just sat in the shock phase of it all? I mean, the tragedy you're talking about is so sudden. I mean, truly, like she ran out to it wasn't like she went on a big trip or a vacation where you're tracking and checking. Like she went to the grocery store, she went to CVS, whatever it is. How long do you feel like you sat in the shock, or are you still in the shock?
There's still moments when I think, is this my life? Is this my life? I mean, I don't know that I sat in denial ever. I work in healthcare. I'm very scientific based. I'm fact based. When the officer told us she died, I didn't like any of it. That was a fact. Like there was nothing to deny, if that makes sense. I remember sitting across from the officer in the front room of our home. I remember my son sitting on one side, my husband on the other. And it was kind of like the whole room just went black. And it was just kind of this pinpoint of light. You know, it was almost like all the sounds around me and everything just become faded into the darkness. And I think in that moment, there was probably some shock. And I remember even as the officer was in our home, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that I didn't cry, but I was literally gyrating. Like I was bouncing up and down off the couch. I was shaking so badly. That was probably some kind of shock.
Wow.
So, but I wouldn't say that was long-lived for me.
What about you for your husband and your son?
You know, it's hard to speak for them, but I would suspect they were much the same. You know, maybe moments, days. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So, Lisa, it's very important to me, and I appreciate you saying, like, I didn't cry, but I was going through, my body was still having a reaction. It just didn't look the way you would maybe envision it in the movies or how someone else would, which I think is perfectly normal and healthy and a good reminder that everyone's body will respond differently. How did you begin to move forward, to heal? I mean, this is again, a before and after situation. I mean, and as you've mentioned, you work in healthcare, so you had this slightly different perspective, right? You've seen how these things can operate from an outsider's perspective, but now you're inside the box. Now you're the one that actually has to face the tragedy, to face the loss. What were some of the things that you did to try to put the pieces back together so that you could move forward?
That's the strange thing about this. I mean, I'd worked in oncology specifically, for decades. Part of our training is grief, learning about grief. And I thought I knew a thing or two about grief until it happened to me. And I realized I knew nothing, right? Like the thing that everybody's aware of, the 5 stages of grief, is garbage. I mean, it
Tell me more. Talk more about that.
It was written the year I was born, which is a long time ago. And it's been refuted by many, but that's what I thought grief would look like. But when grief landed on my own doorstep, I realized it was garbage.
What felt like garbage to you? Like, how would you describe it to somebody else? Like, what was different for you versus how it was presented to you, and call it like an academic fashion?
Right. So just to review real quickly, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross recognized like almost 60 years ago that medical students needed something to help them understand grief better. So she created this theory and, to simplify it. And she never said it was this simple, but the theory is that we go through 5 stages, which is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and ultimately acceptance. But the way it's drawn out, and we see it in diagrams, it looks like these neat little steps. You finish step 1, you progress to step 2, and that at some point in time, there's this finish line. And yet what I have experienced is more like a bowl of spaghetti. It's random, like especially in acute grief. So that new grief phase, which is a different length of time for everybody. In a 5-minute period, you can be pissed off as crazy, angry at the world and God and everything else. You can be in depression, you can be denial, you can be, bargaining with God. Oh, just take me instead, whatever that looks like. So it's just this jumbled up, confusing mess. But I think the thing that makes that darn theory really garbage, if I can be frank, is that it made people like me feel like we were doing grief wrong. My husband might disagree with me, but I don't think I was super angry. I had nobody to blame. Katie was at fault in the accident. Her car left one side of the highway, crossed the ditch, and she hit another vehicle. There's nobody to be angry at. So I felt like, am I supposed to be feeling this way? I just felt like I was doing it all wrong.
Wow.
And then I would have moments where I would feel like I just want to love everybody, and I just want to be a better person, and I just want to kind of be Katie's representative here on this earth, and I just want to shine bright. So I'd kind of go through that, and then I'd be a hot mess again. And I don't know if you ever get to an endpoint in grief.
Or if you ever get to like full acceptance is what you're saying. Like to me, the acceptance stage, see, I mean, although maybe not, maybe you accepted it so fast.
Well, I accepted the
And
reality, right?
right,
And then different people feel differently about that word acceptance. Like,
right. What does that mean? What does that even mean? Like, yeah,
I accepted the reality. I mean, it was a
right,
fact. Katie had died.
right. She was here. Now
Do
she's
I like it?
right.
Do I want to accept the fact that my child died at 17? No, I don't.
Mm. Talk to me a little bit about, I'm always fascinated, not surprisingly, around support
Mm.
and how people show up for people in tough times. A time like this seems very tricky to outsiders to listen, what do I do? Right? You're my friend. This tragedy happens. It's so unimaginable. It's so sudden that people have a very hard time wrapping their head around it. And as you know, it is the most unnatural thing in the world to have to bury your child. Like it's just not supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what I see oftentimes when tragedies like this happen is the community, friends and family, they can often kind of clamp up because they're so shocked, they're so sad, and frankly, they project what they think they would want or need, and they can't imagine what to do, so they do nothing.
Bingo.
So I wanted to ask you, what was your experience around support, particularly in the earlier days, if you remember? Because again, I still imagine some of it is still a bit of a fog. What do you remember happening? And what do you kind of recommend to people who find themselves in a position to support someone like you in those, God forbid, situations?
Yep. It was a big eye opener. A couple of things. One is, I think, I felt like my family became like the poster family of child loss, because I think it was very much front and center. Bad things happen to good people all the time. Accidents happen. Your loved one can leave the door on an ordinary Tuesday night and not come home. And people did not want to face that reality. Like, as a side note, I can't tell you how many people asked me, so was she drinking? Was she on drugs? Was she texting? She must have been. And no to all of those. But as much as it irritated me, what I've come to learn, as human beings, we want reasons for these things that don't make sense, right? Because then our brain can say, if Katie was texting, for example, then that's why she died.
Then I can avoid this situation, or
Right.
I can tell my children to be extra vigilant in the car, or I can take away. Correct. I think that this example is such a good one. We're trying to justify reasons because the reality is so hard and unfair. I mean, Lisa, what happened to you, what happened to her is unfair.
Absolutely. And people don't want to recognize the fact that we were an ordinary family. Katie was following the rules,
Yeah.
it was a terrible accident, right? That wasn't really anybody's fault. So that was one thing. Another thing I found is that the people I expected to be there for me couldn't be there for me. And what I mean by that is I grew up in a house where, my mom and dad were my go-to people all the time. I'm quite close with my brother, but they weren't there for me. And not because they didn't love me. It took me a couple of years to get this, to wrap my head around this, because actually I met a woman who was further into her grief journey who laid this out for me. And I was like, oh, of course. She said, not only are they grieving Katie, like my mom and dad lost their one of two grandchildren, but they're grieving for you. And my dad is a fixer. He couldn't fix this for me. And it still kills him. So they were grieving themselves. They were not equipped to help me. But the other cool thing that often happens, and I think every grieving mother that I've ever talked to has a story like this, is somewhere in the outliers, an acquaintance, somebody you maybe haven't even met before, but somebody connects you, rises to the surface. They know exactly what to say. They show up. They know what to do. It's like they're earth angels. But it sure highlighted to me that before I lost Katie, I was that person that you mentioned. You don't know what to do. So you pull back and you do nothing. Because I didn't want to offend anybody. I didn't want to call them when they were resting. I didn't want to make them sad by talking about their person. Well, now I realize I had it all wrong. But for me, the support came when I reached out for it. I've always been here's the problem. What am I going to do about it? I've never really been the person to wait around for other people to help me. I go looking for it. And unfortunately, in my place of work at the cancer clinic, there was a woman who lost her son in a car accident about 5 years prior to my loss. And right away, she reached out and she said, just so you know, there is a group of us here in the city. We get together, we have coffee. I don't know if this is the right time for you, but when you're ready, let me know. And I don't know how I did it, because Katie died 17 days before Christmas. I don't know how I did this, but I think it was about 3 or 4 days before Christmas, these ladies were having a bit of a get-together. And I challenged myself to drive there. I gave myself permission that I didn't have to go in, but I needed to drive there. And part of that reason was I figured I needed to take that road where Katie died. I live in a smaller community. It was a road I was going to have to travel many times. And I just felt like the sooner I drove that road, the better. So I went and I stayed there for 4 hours. And even though it was all new to me and it was not what I expected. I mean, when you think about a grief support group for bereaved mothers, what do you picture? A very sad room with crying women and a lot of Kleenex. And it wasn't like that. I mean, there was like 15 or 20 women there, all at different points in their grief journey. I was kind of the new guy, but people were just having ordinary conversations. And I'll never forget eavesdropping on 2 women across the room from me. So here we were, a bunch of grieving mothers, and these 2 women, they looked put together. They had makeup on, they, had nice clothes on, and to look at them, it was just 2 ordinary women sharing what was going on in their lives. But what they said changed my grief journey forever. The one woman, now keep in mind that these ladies were 4 and 5 years into their journey already. But because Christmas was coming up, the one mom said, you know what? I don't think I'm ever going to be able to do Christmas like we used to. But she said, my son deserves a good Christmas. So we're just going to do things differently. She said, we're going to open up gifts on New Year's Eve. Instead of going tobogganing with the neighbors, we're going to play board games with his friends. And instead of having the big turkey dinner, which her daughter loved so much, she said, we're going to have hot dogs and chili. So I thought, that's interesting. Like, I can do grief whatever way I want. Other people don't have to get it. And then the other lady said, yeah, I get that. She said, and my daughter loved to live big, loved to laugh loud, loved to have fun. She said, I want to honor my daughter by starting to live more like that. And I mean, even when I say that, that still gives me goosebumps.
Yeah.
Because I have taken that on too. And it's like, death has already taken too much from me. I refuse to let it win.
Yeah. There's a couple of things I want to zero in on that you said. Or actually, one thing I want to zero in on that you said, and then another question for you. When you described these women that you saw in this group that were wearing makeup and they look put together, one of the first things that hits me is just a reminder that you never know what people are carrying.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was my first instinct when you said that. Is what a good reminder that even the most put together, gregarious women, people, like below the surface, they are walking around with scars and grief that you may not know about. It's just like, it's a good reminder. I mean, again, most people hopefully don't go through the tragedies that you all did in that group, losing a child, especially particularly young. And we all carry some of that. We're just putting on a face.
Yeah, so true.
And then my question for you is, I really appreciate the transparency around how your parents and even sounds like your brother handled things. And I've heard about this like invisible friend syndrome that happens in grief. What is the support that you needed most? What were you yearning for? What would good have looked like? Because I know for me, I've never been in your shoes. God willing, I never will. And I know that these tragedies are an inevitable part of life, and we want to be ready. We want to be prepared. And I don't feel prepared. So I want to learn from you, what is that thing, with the caveat that what works for you may not work for somebody else. But I am curious to dig in there.
Yeah, and I do think that needs to be repeated. Grief is such an individual journey. I think you could line up 100,000 grieving mothers, and they're all going to be different. We all, are different humans coming into the tragedy. We all have different personalities. We all have different, maybe past traumas. So I think that's important to recognize. But for me personally, I needed people to be present and to listen, and maybe uncomfortably for them to ask me questions. I mean, honestly, as much as it annoyed me when people asked, well, was she drinking or was she on drugs? I'd rather people ask me questions about the accident.
At least they had the guts to ask.
Rather than just kind of, skirt around it and not say anything. But I think the kindest thing that anybody could say, regardless of who you've lost, is what you did. Tell me about Katie.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about, what are some of your favorite memories? And, even though that might bring tears to the eyes of somebody who's grieving, you will watch the smile come to their face.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine it's almost like happy tears because you get to talk about her, where versus if no one asks, it's you and your husband or you and your son, and there's only so many people to really talk to about it.
One of the fears that is across the board of all grieving parents is that our children will be forgotten. And one of the best ways we can keep them alive, so to speak, is to keep telling their stories, keep sharing their name. So that was just something beautiful. And there's a grief guru out there. His name is Tom Zuba. He unfortunately has experienced tremendous loss. He lost his wife. He lost his small infant daughter. And then he lost a teenage son.
Oh.
And he says, and I do believe this to be true now that I'm 10 years into my journey, that we need to talk about our story, our person's loss, their death, like all of it. We need to tell our story over and over and over and over and over again until we don't need to tell it anymore. So what that means is that we need lots of ears. We need lots of people holding space, even if it's uncomfortable, even if we're doing the big, ugly, snotty cry, because people who are grieving need to talk. I mean, you think about going to therapy. What do you think happens at therapy?
Right.
Lots of sharing and crying, feeling.
And connection. I mean, that's what you're talking about, is creating connection and pushing back on the loneliness that can encourage depression if you're not careful and all of those things. These things that you're sharing, they make so much sense. And at the same time, I know you work with other grievers. It's got to be so much harder to actually do these things in practice than in theory. I mean, how difficult do you find it for the widows or the grievers that you support to actually put this into practice? I mean, this is heavy stuff. Are there any tactics that you've learned that really helps people begin to truly walk down this?
I think I'm going to answer that with a story, if I may.
Please.
I had a big turning point in my grief journey. I think it was about 9 months in. And as ridiculous as it sounds, my husband and son and I had a hard time learning how to be a family of 3.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense.
Had to, right?
Yeah.
And we found that we were in the same house. I mean, my son was 15 at the time. If we were all at home while he was out the door to hang out with his friends because he didn't want to be with sad mom and dad. And my husband and I would get busy doing things. So we never really connected at home. So we started taking time away. Some of it was half a day. We'd go to a concert. Some of it was longer. But there was one trip where we went and we loved to hike. And we were walking through this gorgeous, like it was like out of a storybook, all these giant redwoods. And it spit us out onto a beach. And oddly enough, at the end of July, on this gorgeous, perfect day, there was nobody on this beach. So I remember picking up a stick and writing Katie's name in the sand, and my husband and son kind of walking down the beach. And I remember trailing along behind them. And, it was just, I will never forget that day. It was picture perfect. I had gorgeous redwood forest on one side with this deserted beach, and I had sparkling blue water on the other side. The sun felt like a warm blanket on my shoulder, and I remember tipping my head up to the sun and smiling. And then in the next minute, feeling like that punch in the gut and like hearing the voice in my head, like, what is wrong with you, Lisa? Your daughter is dead. How dare you smile? What kind of a mother are you? But then there was kind of the other voice in my head that was like, whoa, 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 just a minute, just a minute. In that millisecond that I smiled, that I felt okay. Did I stop grieving? No. Does it mean that I'm over it? No. Does it mean that I've forgotten Katie? No. So I kind of had this realization, this aha moment that I can carry grief in one hand and joy in the other.
Yeah.
And they don't cancel each other out. And another quick story. Now, I don't know what you or your listeners believe. I become a very spiritual person, and I saw a psychic at one point in time. And at the end of our time together, she said, Lisa, when you smile, Katie smiles. When you laugh, Katie laughs. So go give her something amazing to watch.
Yeah.
And I still get goosebumps, but so I'm always thinking, okay, girl, okay, you want to laugh, you want to have fun, let's have fun.
I love
that. Has helped me on my journey a lot.
I love that. That's a beautiful place to end this conversation, Lisa. One of the things I didn't mention at the beginning is you've written some pretty amazing pieces. There's the Journey to Healing, and then you have a second book called Now What? But I'd love for you to share more about where people can learn more about the different books that you've written, or ways that they can get connected to you if there is a need, or again, someone in their community that they feel like, oh gosh, Lisa would be the perfect person for my friend to speak to.
Absolutely. Well, I think the one best place to go is my website, and that's griefsupportformoms.com. You can find my books on there. There's loads of free resources as well. I've got a podcast on there, which I've been told by lots of people, it's geared towards bereaved moms, obviously, but that a lot of the grief measures on there apply to anybody who's struggling in grief. But yeah, they should go check that out.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. Thank you for sharing Katie with us and allowing us to have a glimpse of your amazing daughter. I feel better informed than I did coming into this conversation, and I hope to have many more with you.
Thank you so much for having me today, Jordan.